Good morning, everybody, and welcome to yet another Tuesday Tune-Up. I know that last week Father Rick O'Brien spoke on the Ten Commandments, so I thought there'd be some continuity if I spoke today about what is referred to as the Great Commandment or the greatest commandment of Jesus, which is to love God with heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love neighbor as self, as I'm sure most of you know. But I want to backtrack a little so that we know how we got there, and backtrack even further than the Ten Commandments of last week, which many would say Jesus' great commandment is a summary thereof. And that's accurate, but I want to get even further back. I'm inspired today, oddly enough, but I want to give credit to where credit is due, by the fact that I was at Walmart recently, and on the back of the little Walmart employee vest, it says 6 plastic bottles were recycled to make this vest, which I thought, that's kind of cool. And then I noticed everybody in the store had one. I thought, wow, look at all these bottles walking around. But of course, they are no longer bottles. They are Walmart vests. But it is interesting to know the Walmart vest used to be plastic bottles. They used to hold Coca-Cola and water and whatnot. It expands our understanding of the Walmart vest, which would be really valuable, especially if we had a curiosity about the Walmart vest. Well, perhaps we don't have a curiosity about that, but we ought, and we will be rewarded if we do have a curiosity about Jesus's precise summary of all of the law that the children of Israel had come up with, remembering that Jesus himself was a child of Israel and a devout Jewish person. So, yes, it's true that it's sort of a summary of the Ten Commandments, but actually the greatest commandment is a summary of 613 commands that exist in Torah. This number was come up with in the 3rd century by a rabbi who was writing Talmud, meaning explanation and critical examination and organization of Torah, the holy books of Judaism. And so he comes up with 613 commands, which, if we took those 613 laws of Torah and condensed them into 10 big macro categories, we would have the 10 Commandments. But we also would have lost, just as those vests are no longer bottles, we no longer would have the specific law, for instance, that a priest must not walk into the synagogue or the temple drunk, which I forget, it was maybe number 321 when they were codified in the 3rd century. 321 was a priest not be drunk in a holy place. That begs the question, can the priest be drunk outside the temple and synagogue? But maybe I'm thinking too much about this. You see, though, that idea of a priest honoring the sanctity of the temple goes back to honoring God and honoring the Sabbath, which are 2 of the 10 Commandments, of course. Now, back to Jesus and back to recycling, because that's the theme of the day. Jesus says, love God with heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love neighbor as self. These are 2 direct quotes from Scripture. The first comes from Deuteronomy 6, and verses 4 through 7 in Deuteronomy 6 go like this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And I'll continue. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Nice stuff. But again, the key part of all this is what Jesus quotes. You shall love the Lord your God with heart, mind, strength. Now, the second half is an exact quote of another Bible verse from Leviticus. We know love your neighbor as yourself, because that's the second half of Jesus' greatest commandment, but it's interesting the context it's in Leviticus 19. Leviticus 19 verse 18 goes like this. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Now it's important that this passage ends with, I am the Lord. Keep in mind, when Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he says, Hear, O Israel, love your God with heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. Now it's the first century. We're in Palestine. The people hear Jesus say, love your neighbor as yourself. Instantly, in all of their heads, they're going to hear these words, I am the Lord, even though Jesus didn't say it. But they all knew that phrase, that passage from Torah ended like that. So as Jesus was giving the great commandment, it was done with absolutely intense purpose. It was intelligent, purposeful, precise, and concise. And what was said and what was left unsaid was all very thought out by Jesus. He also knew that the beginning part, where he says, love your God with heart, mind, soul, and strength, the hearer would have heard, oh, that's what gets said after we are commanded by God not to take vengeance on anyone. He didn't need to repeat it. Do you see what I'm saying? So, I guess what I want to honor today, you think, oh, well, we're talking about the great commandment. The preacher's takeaway is going to be easy or hard. We have to love our neighbor as ourselves. And how do we do that? We ground ourselves in love of God with heart, mind, soul, and strength. No, that's not the takeaway. It's kind of a given, frankly. And it also wouldn't be the first 100th time you've heard it out of my mouth, so let's not waste a Tuesday tune-up. Today's takeaway is on the priceless and godly value of seeing what has come before us and seeing it as opportunity and resource for the present and the future. Repurposing and recycling, especially theologically, is godly. It's holy. And the Spirit can guide us in this refreshment, in this renewal. This message of being a godly recycler and to know that God is himself or herself or their selves. God is a recycler. God is a reuser. God sent his only Son, and for all the new things Jesus did, all of them have roots in what was old and very old. This message of repurposing and recycling really matters, especially right now as we are continuing to exit from COVID. Because everything's new, but everything's not. As we decide how to live today, tomorrow, this week, which things we're going to continue to do virtually, which things we're doing in person again, whether or not we go to a movie theater this weekend, all these things these decisions can be made with purposefulness by grounding ourselves in love of God, love of self, but also in a valuation of those things that have preceded us, our own little inclinations and preferences, but also old wisdoms, things that we've been doing based on knowledge or wisdom for decades can be looked at and say, what can be retained? What muscle memory can be retained as I move into the future? But remember, some things are going to be not worth as much. Like the bottles, like the 6 bottles that became the vest at Walmart. It's functioning now as a vest. The 6 bottles and the Coca-Cola and the water they carried are gone. They're not to come back. They're not going to make that vest back into bottles. There's rules against that, by the way. So we have to ask ourselves what bottles need to become vests in our life. Which of the 613 laws that we may have made for ourselves can be condensed and made into macro understandings, like into 10 commandments? And when we need a macro theme, how can we distill all that and vest ourselves in the love of God and then live from that godly love? I suggest to you that's far more likely to happen if you look through your past and say, God, help me as I repurpose and recycle what has gone before as I move into the now and the future. You got it? All right. Thanks for listening. Happy Tuesday, and God bless you all.